Hello everyone, welcome to a new tutorial in the Unreal Engine 5 FPS tutorial series. In this one, we're going to be adding some sort of chaos destruction, probably to one of the cubes around the map, the blue cubes. Not only that, but we're also going to be fixing a few of the issues I kind of missed in the past tutorials, some of them being the fact that we're not playing the weapon fire animation. We have particles or projectiles, that shoot off a little bit weirdly when we move, so that's not fixed. And then also these particles are just very weird, so we're going to be using a different set of particles. Now, let's just start by fixing some of these issues. First one we're going to fix is actually the projectiles, because this is the easiest one. So to fix this, I'm going to open the content drawer right here at the bottom left. I'm going to go to FPS tutorial 4. And then inside of the blueprint character, we're going to open that. And then we're going to find the place where we spawn the bullet or the projectile. And right here, right where we spawn the bullet actor and we ignore this character, we also need to ignore, from the character, ignore the bullet itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the capsule component and I'm going to type the same exact thing we did for the bullet. So ignore actor when moving. Then we're going to click should ignore, and then I'm going to take this actor, which is our bullet actor, and then plug it in there. And then we can just connect that, and then compile. Now if I move and shoot, you can see that we don't have any such issues anymore. Okay, that fixes that issue. Now, the next issue that we have is actually a issue that I left in the projectile itself, so the bullet itself. I added physics to it, and that is a bit of a mistake and will cause a few issues later on. So let's go to the bullet, let's open it, and then I'm going to go to viewport just to see this better. If I click on projectile movement, if I click on the sphere and we scroll down, I added simulate physics. We can uncheck this. That's going to help us a lot later on, so we can properly control the projectile with the movement component. If I play again, you're going to see that the projectile should still shoot, but now we have kind of a sticky projectile. This is quite easy to fix. You can just go back to the bullet, projectile movement, and then in projectile movement, just set shoot bounds. And that will lead to a very similar result, but with better performance and more control for us. Now, let's do one more thing about the bullets, which is going to be really quick. We're going to make them add some sort of impulse to the objects we shoot, mostly because we're not doing that at the moment, and I do really think it's going to be a lot cooler if we do that. This is really simple, and in fact, in the first-person template project that Unreal Engine comes with, they do basically just this, so we'll do something super similar. I'm going to go to the bullet, I'm going to click on sphere, scroll down a little bit, make sure you find, or just find the events here at the bottom, and then in on component hit, we're going to click on that. We already have a little bit of functionality because we're spawning an emitter. Inside of here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the component that we're hitting, and I'm going to check is simulating physics. That's going to make sure that we're only doing this for components that are actually physics components. Otherwise, we'll get a warning. I'll show you in a moment. But for now, let's just check this. And now, if it is simulating physics, what we're going to do is we're going to drag from that other component, and we're going to go add impulse, add location. And what this will do is it will basically just, as the function name says, it will apply an impulse at a specific location. Now, the location of our sphere actor is going to be the exact kind of impact point when we call this, because this function gets called just when we impact. So for location, we can really just say get actor location. And then for the impulse, what we're going to do is we're going to get the velocity of this actor, and then I'm just going to multiply it by some value, mostly because otherwise it's going to be very small. So let's just go by 100, for example. And then just assign that. You can now compile and save. And that shoots off magically into the stratosphere. Now, hold on. Let's just duplicate this a few times. I'm just pressing Control-C, Control-V. And ignore kind of the cubes themselves for a moment. Go back to the bullet. I'm going to change this to maybe something like 10 instead. let's just see what value doesn't shoot them off into the stratosphere. So yeah, 10 seems to work pretty well. Awesome. We now have kind of rotating cubes. We're applying some sort of impulse, which is great. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to get rid of these horrible particles. These really don't look good at all, and also they just stay there forever. So let's fix that. To fix that, I'm just going to go back to bullet, and then inside of this code, I'm going to go to the emitter template. I'm going to click, and I'm going to change this for explosion, so particle explosion, and just compile that. That's much better. At least these disappear. And I'm also going to go back and make them a lot tinier, just so we don't see like super huge explosions. And now it feels kind of cool. As a matter of fact, now we could really just make them not do this only once. We could do this every time they impact something, though that might actually cause issues because this gets called when they roll too. So I'm not going to do that for now. Great. Now that we've done that, the next part of the things that we really need to fix is adding the firing animation to the weapon. We're not doing that. Now, we are playing the fire on the character's arms, so we are playing all that, but what we're not doing is we're not playing this animation that we have. If we go to assault rifle animations, we have a weapon assault rifle fire. And what this is, it's basically the rifle itself firing, and we're not playing that. So we're going to need to follow a very similar process to what we did before and just fix that really quickly. First, we're going to go to the rifle itself, or to the animation itself. I'm going to do just as I did before with the character, and I'm going to make a montage out of this. So I'm going to right click, create animation montage, name it AM instead of A, and then delete the montage part. Now for this one, in the montage settings, we can just leave it in the default slot. That's totally fine. We're not going to have too many slots, and I'm going to remove the blend. We will need to create some sort of animation blueprint for the weapon, because if you go to blueprint weapon and viewport, if we go to our skeletal mesh, we don't really have an animation blueprint. So let's create that. This is going to be very simple. Just go to the skeletal mesh for the rifle, right click, create animation blueprint, and call it ABP assault rifle. Open it, and the only thing we need to do in here, there's no need to place any animations. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place a slot, so we make sure that we can actually play this animation. It's going to be default slot because that is the only slot that we have on this weapon. By the way, bear in mind that the slots and the groups are specific to each skeleton. So for our weapon, we have a specific skeleton, and that skeleton doesn't have any other slots, which is great in this case. I'll just save that. I'm going to Control B just to make sure it's selected and close that. And then in the weapon blueprint, I'm just going to assign it. Great. Now we have everything set up so we can play the firing animation, or the firing animation montage. We just need to play it. Now let's head to where we play the normal character fire, which is right here in the shoot event. We have this play montage, which plays the character animation montage. Now, we can't call this other montage we have on the character arms. We have to call it on the weapon. Not only on the weapon actor, but on the specific skeletal mesh, which at the moment we can't do from the character because we don't have access to it. Now, if you remember, for us to access the actor of the weapon, what we do is we go equipped weapons, and then we go get. This is our list of equipped weapons. And then we get the specific index that is equipped. That said, this, if you hover, it returns an actor reference. So to get the weapon, we would have to cast, similar to what we do in animation blueprints and widget blueprints. And that's a bit messy. So instead of all that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use blueprint interfaces. Now, what blueprint interfaces are, they're sort of this layer over the blueprints themselves that allow us to call functions generically without even knowing if that blueprint specifically is going to respond to that. But if it does, then it's going to be allowed to execute some sort of functionality without us knowing exactly what it does or anything of that sort, or even what it is, which for us is great. So to do that, I'm going to head to the content drawer. I'm going to go to core. I'm going to right click, search for blueprint interface, and I'm going to call this BPI for blueprint interface. and then weapon. Inside of here, if you open it, you're going to see that all we get is a functions part. So the only thing we can add is functions. And for our functions, we're going to just say shoot. We don't need anything else. We can just save and compile. Now, to anything we add this blueprint interface, we will be able to call a shoot functionality. So for example, just as I was showing you before, if I go equip weapons, and then I get a copy with the equipped weapon index, normally in here, I would not be able to access any functionality inside of the weapon, but I am able to call the shoot function because it's in a blueprint interface. It says shoot message. So this will make sure that if this actor has this interface implemented, it will call this function. At the moment though, obviously we haven't really implemented that interface in the weapon blueprint. We can do that super easily by just going to class settings, and then in class settings at the bottom, you're going to find implemented interfaces. You click add and then search for the interface we just created. You can add it. It's going to be added right there. And then it's going to give you under here, under interfaces, it's going to give you the shoot function. We can double click to implement that. Great. Inside of the shoot function, I can just drag the assault rifle, skeletal mesh, play montage, just like we did before with the character. And the montage I'm going to play is the weapon assault rifle fire. I'm going to compile and save. And then the last thing we need to do is go back to the character and then make sure that we call this somewhere next to our character montage. So maybe right here for now. And then compile and save. Now, if our animation blueprint is assigned, and if you made sure to add the slot, and the montage has the slot, and the character is calling all of this, everything should work. And if we play now, we should see the weapon kind of playing an animation. We might actually not be very able to see it because the ejection port is on the other side of the weapon. So at the moment, we don't really have a lot of visibility for that. But if it is very likely to be playing it, hold on. As a matter of fact, let's do something so we can see it. If I go to core animation blueprint, I'm just going to do a little trick that you've probably seen before. I'm going to duplicate the transform modify bone. I'm going to add another one of these. And this is just going to be us making sure. There's actually more ways, but I think this one's pretty fun. So I'm going to remove the binding for mouse sway location. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the weapon to the left and then rotate it really weirdly, just so we can see the ejection port. And then as you can see, we are playing the animation when I shoot now. Awesome. All right. So we fixed that too. Now on to the main part of the video. I know that got a little bit long, but still, this is the main part of the video. What we're going to do is we're going to add chaos cubes, basically. So we're going to convert these into some sort of destructible object. And I'm going to take you step by step through the process of doing that. I've done some testing here, which is why some cubes are missing. I wasn't entirely sure how some of the things work now. I haven't used chaos in a few Unreal Engine versions because we mostly use either Unreal Engine 5 or 426 for some of our projects. But in this version of Unreal Engine, the way we're going to set all of that up is we're going to start by going to selection mode, and we're going to go to fracture. You need to keep one of the cubes selected or whatever you want to make into a chaos destructible object. Inside of here, we're going to have this generate menu. We can click on new, which will generate a new geometry collection asset, blah, blah, blah. Basically, this will allow us to fracture the thing. So if we click new, it's going to ask us to pick a path for this object. I'm going to go to FPS tutorial, and then I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it chaos. And I'm going to call this SM cube geometry. And then create. Now that will highlight the entire cube. This is not a fractured cube yet. As a matter of fact, you can see right here in the fracture hierarchy that we only have one piece. Right here, you can also see it. We need to find some sort of fracture type and click on it. So in this case, I'm going to click on cluster. Cluster is going to immediately display a bunch of gizmos for us to see how this object can be kind of spread out. And now if I just click on fracture right here, the object will be fractured. You can see we have a lot of pieces now, 156 to be specific. And to see the destruction itself, all we need to do is scroll up on this window, and this explode amount, you can just increase it. Awesome. With that, we basically have a destructible cube. That's all we needed to do in here. So we can go back to the selection mode. You can ignore the fact that it's kind of set to a kind of half destroyed amount. And if you don't like it though, you can go to fracture and just set this to 0 and then go back to selection. Now the cube does, you can see all the pieces right now, though by default, this is not fractured. So keep that in mind. It is not fractured. You're just seeing the bones, as they call them. To stop or to kind of stop seeing this, all you need to do is click on SM Cube Geometry and then scroll down. There's a Show Bone Colors. You just need to uncheck that. Awesome. Now, with that, we basically now have a cube that we can destroy. This cube is different from these other 2 cubes, which are just normal cubes. This one is a geometry collection. Right now, I believe if we shoot it, not much is really going to happen. As a matter of fact, it looks a lot tougher than the other ones. So we still need to implement a few things before we can really destroy it. The way we're going to destroy this is we're going to create some sort of physics field or a chaos field that is going to be spawned from our bullet whenever we hit something that will launch some sort of destruction amount on the cube. That sounds very complicated, but it really doesn't have to be. The engine has these master fields, they're called. So if we search for them, as a matter of fact, if we just search for FS field, you're going to find this FS master field. If I drag it in here, this is basically a small sphere that allows us to destroy something. I don't believe this plays by, oh yeah, it does play by default. So you can see that if I place it right there, all it does is it really just destroys chaos cubes or chaos whatever. So we're going to use this and we're going to trigger it whenever something hits. This is going to be really good because it has a lot of settings for us to mess around with. These are a lot more complicated generally, but in our case, we're just going to use them as they are at the moment. Let's just delete it from the scene. We'll go to the bullet, and inside of the bullet, if we go to the on component hit, this is basically where we're going to do all of the stuff we want to do. We can check simulate physics. That is totally fine. And then after it, I'm going to call spawn actor from class. The actor we're going to spawn is that FS master field that I was talking about before. And the spawn transform is going to be get the world transform of this actor. So get actor transform. I'm going to right click on the result and promote it to a variable, just so we can access it easier, because we're going to have to change a few properties on it. The properties we're going to need to change are the trigger, the type. This is basically what we need to change. Hold on. It's the activation type. So we're going to change activation type to trigger. That's going to be the first change we're going to make. So we can make sure that this does not trigger by some sort of delay. We want to trigger it ourselves. Then I'm going to take the field and we're going to change the radius or the radial magnitude. This is going to change how far this is going to apply. And we're going to mess around with this value a little bit. But for now, let's just set it to 150. That seems to be pretty good for my testing. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is trigger the field. So just take the field and there's a function called CE trigger. And this function is going to allow us to just make it kind of destroy whatever chaos object is next to it. So again, this is what we're doing. We're spawning it, we're saving it, we're changing its activation type to trigger, radial magnitude to 150, and then we're triggering it. We could make a child blueprint of this blueprint and just set these things, and we will in a moment. But for now, let's just test it like this. Okay, that did not seem to be working. Let's check again. Let's try a few things. So the first thing we're going to try is I'm going to go ahead and kind of not have this in the impulse. So not check if it's physics. And then now it immediately works. Okay, so I think the issue we had is that this cube might not be physics, so we can just... It does say it is simulating physics, so maybe it just didn't recognize it for some reason, but that is totally fine. We don't need to do this simulate physics here. We can always just do that at the end. So we can do our master field stuff first. And then, as a matter of fact, this is better because we apply the field and then we can really just apply physics. So we can do that. And that already looks pretty good. Now, objects that don't have chaos are just going to flop around, and then objects that do are going to allow us to destroy them physically. Let's place a few more of these in the level. And as a matter of fact, to place a few more, I'm going to make sure to just make a blueprint for this so we can reuse it. And then we're also going to kind of subclass or create a child blueprint of that master field blueprint that we were talking about. Let's start with let's start with just doing that. So I'm going to go to this master field. I just clicked on the little loop icon here. And then I'm going to right click, create child blueprint. And we're going to call this one FS master field bullet, maybe. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it over to our core folder and move. Now we have all of the functionality inside of that master field, but we can modify any of the things we want. So the things we were modifying, if we go to class defaults before, in the bullet, we were modifying the activation type, the trigger, and the radial magnitude to 150. So we can change just that. So activation type, trigger, and then the radial magnitude, which I cannot see here, but if I just search for it, radial magnitude, I can just change this to 150. And then we can compile and save. And if we go back to the bullet, we can remove all of this code. We do need to keep the trigger. And instead of FS master field, we can call FS master field bullet. And also ensure that it always spawns, ignores collisions, just so we don't have any issues. And now if we play, you're going to see we have the same exact functionality. The difference is that now we can modify our properties here. So for example, if I make the radial magnitude smaller, you will see that we destroy less of the object, which is really interesting. Awesome. Now, next step is, just as I mentioned before, we're going to create a blueprint for this just so we can reuse it easier. So I'm going to right click on it, and then inside of here, we are going to create a blueprint. Okay, right here, now the third time's the charm. Right here, we're going to click on this, and then it's going to say create blueprint from selection. And then this is going to ask us what kind of blueprint we want. We don't need to change anything inside of here. The only thing we're going to change is right here, the blueprint name. We're going to call this B, or BP is going to be Chaos Cube. Now let's just select. And that's just going to create a blueprint for us. It's a geometry collection actor. Everything is completely fine. Now we can reuse this Chaos Cube for anything we want. It's going to be inside of our content drawer, and I can just drag it off. And any settings we change inside of it are going to change for everything. As a matter of fact, I'm going to control click on these two cubes, right click, and then inside of here, I'm going to say replace selected actors with Chaos Cube. And that's going to make sure that every cube is a Chaos Cube. Awesome. That was basically it for this tutorial. Next tutorial, I'm finally going to do what I promised with the characters, and we're going to add a character and add ragdolls to it with some sort of like small, simple health system, and it's going to be really fun. So I'll see you next one. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I really hope you're liking the series. I am very excited for the next one, so see you.